Hello my fellow creators and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be making a couple of Halloween cards using some supplies I had in my stash. So I'm going to pull in a couple of stamp sets, a couple of stencils, some of my Distress Oxide inks, and do some Copic coloring as well. And please excuse my scratchy voice. I'm fighting off a bit of a cold. So I'm just trying to get through this voiceover without too many sneezes or sniffles. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. For my first card, I'm going to be bringing in some of my Distress Oxide inks. I'll be using Dusty Concord and Chip Sapphire. I'm using a stencil by Echo Park that I had in my stash. It's called Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I'll just use the blending brushes I have and go ahead and blend some color onto this panel. While I like the way the colors blended together, I thought the panel could use a little bit of shimmer. So I brought in some of my Nouveau Glimmer Paste and spread that over the stencil as well, just to give a little bit of glitz and glam to the panel. Once I'm finished spreading the Nouveau Glimmer Paste all over it, I'll set this panel aside to dry and get working on my next panel. For this one, I've pulled in Squeezed Lemonade and Dried Marigold for my Distressed Oxide inks. And I'm using a stencil that I think I bought last year by Simon Says Stamp, and that one is called Candy Corn. I used the washi tape to mask off the parts of the stencil that I didn't want to cover with Distress Oxide, and they were the perfect width to cover the sections I did not want to color in. So once I got the yellow on the panel, I went back, moved the tapes up a bit, and went in with my Dried Marigold. This proved to be a little more difficult because it was covering part of the part of the stencil that I did want the color to go onto. So you'll see in just a few minutes, I give up on the tape and bring in some cardstock and just hold it against the part that I don't want color to go onto. Now that I've finished ink blending over the stencil, I brought in some Distress Oxide spray in Spiced Marmalade, just to add a few splatters onto the card panel. Now that my panel's done, I'm going to go ahead and set it aside to dry. In the meantime, I'll bring in my stamp sets and get them on my MISTI so that I can stamp them and get them colored. The first stamp set I'm using is by Newton's Nook called Candy Corn. And I love the sentiment. It says, candy corn counts as a vegetable, right? While I don't like candy corn myself, I love the idea of candy counting as a vegetable. The second stamp set I'm using is by Clearly Besotted, and it's Halloween plushies. And this one I believe I purchased last year as well. And I just love the Clearly Besotted images. They're all so adorable. As you can see, I sped up the video, especially during the part where I'm coloring, since I didn't think you'd want to sit through an hour of me coloring images. I'm relatively new at Copic coloring, but I'm pretty pleased with how these images turned out. Now that my panel's dry, I brought in some orange and black cardstock I had in my stash, and I matted the panel on some black and then on orange. I also matted the image and sentiment on some black cardstock. At this point, I thought I was done with the card, so I went ahead and attached it to my card base. But it was missing something, so I brought out my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen and added just a little bit of shimmer to this card. Now that that card's complete, I pulled in my panel covered with stars and Nouveau Glimmer paste and layered that on some black cardstock. I then pulled in the image and sentiment and cut it out using some of my nesting circles dies, as well as cutting out a black circle to mat that on. I went ahead and layered the image onto the black cardstock I cut out. Then decided where I would place it on my panel and cut off just one edge of the circle. From there, I decided I would use some foam tape I had in my stash. And this is foam tape I still have from Dollar Tree. It has lasted me quite a bit, so I'm using that up. This foam tape is very sticky, and taking off the release paper sometimes can be a little tricky. It kind of tries to stick to my fingers. But once I do have the release tape off, I went ahead and added that circle to my panel, and again used my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen and added some sparkle to the image. From there, I went ahead and attached it to my card base, and voila, next card is done. Thanks for sticking around. Let me know in the comments below. Do you absolutely love candy corn or absolutely not? I would be thrilled if you subscribed to my channel or followed me on my other social media platforms. As always, have a beautiful, safe, and creative day.